here we are. Okay, welcome to Sunday morning. Welcome to Bible class. I meant to buy candy. I did not buy candy. If you want me to, I can either go open a box of cornflakes. We'll test those out one by one. I can throw cans of ravioli farther, so if I can go either way. So either. That's something, I don't know, I kind of missed that. It'd be something to get back into. Today's class is Daniel chapter 5, where our study has been Kingdom and Exile to the Kingdom of Christ. So we started out with Babylonian exile, and we're going to work our way to the Kingdom of Christ and cover that time period. Today's Daniel 5. It's the handwriting on the wall. It's what it's known as all the time. Usually I put in the color-changing king. So we'll take a look at the color-changing king along with the handwriting on the wall. Anyways, can you give me a modern-day example of using the idiom handwriting on the wall? I was always amazed when I first started coming to church how much of our language comes from the Bible. Stuff, it's like, well, that's where that came from. You know, it's like, I don't know why I'm amazed. I'm not amazed today. It's just, that's how much it's affected everything. But you've heard the phrase, right? The handwriting on the wall. How's it usually used?
I've seen it where someone has taken on too much, and you see that they're overwhelmed and can't do it.
You see that impending doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say that, guys, we think we had 3 and 4 arms, right? You know, I'm only making 1 trip from the car with stuff from the store. There's no way I'm going to make 2 trips. I got 55 bags from Publix on my finger, you know. But you see that impending doom coming. So that's how it's usually, it's the handwriting on the wall is, you know the big fall is coming, and it comes from this story. So, yeah, so somebody takes on so much, it's going to tumble off on them. You lose. Either they take away all your responsibilities, they take away, who knows? I mean, it could be a new set of boots sitting at the front door. Is the handwriting on the wall that probably the last time I'm back here. You know, there's things like that happen. I took this picture off of Flickr, and it says, even a turtle does not get ahead unless he sticks his neck out. And I like this phrase because that's kind of the deal. I mean, to get ahead, we stick our neck out. Well, what's the impending doom when you stick your neck out? You can get your head chopped off pretty quick. It's double-edged on that kind of thing. But that's the only way we can get ahead. And then, unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished, as Chuck has said many times. And then I stand here to tell you that's the truth. So, another picture I found online of the handwriting on the wall. There's all kinds of pictures out here. I really like this one. Usually you think it's a hand that's just writing on the wall. But this one's got impending doom written all over it. It's like the major serious hand of God writing on the wall. So I just like this picture. Anyways, we'll get to that later. But it's got it all in it. In case you don't want to stick around, can't stick around, fall asleep, whatever, I'll give you a lesson in its entirety in a short part. I mean, that's the idea. What are we trying to understand? Maybe we can look through it for the whole time. Why are we trying to go? In Daniel 5, verses 1 through 4, Belshazzar hosts a feast using the vessels from the temple in Jerusalem. Verse 5, a hand writes on the wall, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. And if you think I speak Hebrew or Aramaic, you're probably wrong. So we're going to go with that for now. Verses 6 through 9, none of the wise men could interpret the handwriting on the wall. Verses 10 through 12, the queen says, call on Daniel. Verses 13 through 28, God interprets the handwriting. He uses Daniel to interpret it. He interprets it. Mene means God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. And Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. So this is what we're seeing, is basically Belshazzar goes against God. He mimics God. He makes fun of God. At that same time, God says, not anymore. And this is where you see the end of the Babylonian kingdom, and it rolls into the Mede and Persian kingdom. So we've been talking about that for 3 weeks, right? We've been talking about it for 3 weeks. 30 and 31, Belshazzar is killed. Darius the Mede becomes the king. We've been talking about this. The first week, Daniel chapter 1, Chuck used this picture. The big statue of that Nebuchadnezzar had built. The gold head represents the Babylonian Empire. This is part of a dream. This is part of the prophecy that you'll see again. We looked at the 4 beasts. We also looked at the ram and the goat. The Babylonian Empire that they're under right now, it'll roll into the Medo-Persian Empire, rolls into the Greeks, the Romans, and then Holy Roman Emperor, but anyways, the church comes after that. The church comes during the Roman Empire. That's when the church comes, the kingdom of Christ. So this is kind of the order that things go, and it sees it. So we'll get into the text, Belshazzar's feast. Daniel 5, verse 1, King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of 1,000. So who is the king at this time? Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. That's it. Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. His name is Belshazzar. And we'll get into that. So he's king, and it's kind of. You could chase a huge rabbit with this one if you want to. I don't recommend it. I try to look at it. Anyways, I'll show you what I've got, and we'll roll from there. Yeah. Jeremiah 27, 6 through 7. Jeremiah says, now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. God speaking, really. Into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and I have given him also the beasts of the field to serve him. All the nations shall serve him, and his son and his grandson, until the time of his land comes. Then many nations and great kings shall make them their slave. So in Jeremiah, the prophecy is Nebuchadnezzar is going to be king, then Nebuchadnezzar's son, then Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, and that's it. That's the end of Babylonian kingdom. So looking at it that way, historical documents, you look at it, the year that this happens is 539 BC. The Bible is probably the most accurate historical document, believe it or not. When you start looking at what's out there and stuff, there's no duplication and stuff. So they say the Bible is probably the most historical, and it agrees with a lot of stuff. So anyways, 539 BC is when this happens. Historical documents put a guy named Nabonidus as king of Babylon. He picks his name in the Bible as Evil Merodach in 2 Kings 25, 27 and Jeremiah 52, 31. A lot of these kings go by multiple names. I don't know why, so it's a good possibility it's the same guy. My understanding is he may not even be bloodline of Nebuchadnezzar. He may be an adopted son in some form or fashion. So I don't know if it comes from concubine or what, but anyways, it's his son. Like I say, you can chase that all you want. We're going to put him in there as the slot of the son. He's the second king. He's the son. Belshazzar is the son of Evil Merodach, the son of Nabonidus. And he serves as a sub-king. And that becomes important in a little while. It seems like minor details. It factors in a lot of stuff in here. If you're interested, Kaufman's got a good amount of stuff in his commentary on Daniel. You can find that online. I use studylight.org. You got a lot of commentaries. Kaufman was Church of Christ. He was Abilene, is where Kaufman worked. It's good. He also references Clark. Clark has a good amount of stuff. Chase the rabbit on your own, okay? We're just going to roll with this. So who came to the great feast? A 1,000 lords. Anybody who's anybody. Yeah, this is the Hollywood of Hollywoods right here, right? This is what this is. It's the Hollywood thing. 1,000. Who's ever had 1,000 people in their house? 500? 100? Chuck's had 100. I can believe that. Chuck's got a house just big enough for 100 people. 1,000 people is a lot of people. Anyways, it's a big hall. My understanding is they've actually excavated a big hall that would hold a crowd that size. So, Daniel 5:2, Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines might drink from them. So you can just see him. You know what, this would make this party really epic? We got 1,000 guys here. What could we do that makes it even bigger? We conquered Jerusalem. We conquered Israel. Let's go get the stuff we took out of the temple. Let's go get that stuff and drink out of it. Better than the dishes we have here. So that's what he's requested. Verse 3 and 4, then they brought in the gold vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, tin, wood, and stone. So it was. So why? Why pick that? If you're having a party, it seems pretty epic already. Chuck?
Well, they regarded the king as a god.
The king was a god, yes.
So from his perspective, from Belshazzar's perspective, I beat the God of the Jews. my grandfather did this. He says his father, but would have been his grandfather. He took them all in. Let's just show this is a symbol of our power over the Jews, over their God, over everything else. So this was a direct affront to God. This wasn't indirect. This is a direct affront.
Exactly. The king of Babylon would consider God. Declares his victory over the God of Israel. This shows how, like you say, it wasn't indirect. This is, I've conquered you. I've taken everything that's precious. I've taken your people. I've taken your land. I've taken the stuff they used to worship you with. Now we worship me. So that's where he's at. You're right. This is exactly what it is. The Jewish opinion is that Belshazzar decided to insult God based on a mathematical error. You know, I always love that kind of stuff. He believed the 70 years of Babylonian captivity was over, and they had victory over Jehovah. He knew about the prophecy that they were going to be in captivity for 70 years. He added it up. 70 years, we win. And there's a quote out of another commentary. I'll be honest with you, I got the author's name. I don't know what the name of the commentary is. I think it's Keys to the Old Testament, but don't swear to it. Belshazzar figured on the basis of Jeremiah's statement that Belshazzar had been in the kingdom some 20 years at the time, though not king all that period. And the extent of Nebuchadnezzar's reign was 45 years, and that evil Merodach had been king for 2 years. So 23 plus 45 plus 2, 70. He added it up. He says, well, there's your 70 years. We have beat what God's prophecy was. He made a mistake he counted from when the captivity started, when they first grabbed Daniel and those guys, the best of Israel, rather than when the deportation ended. That's when the 70 years starts. So he celebrated early, basically. Hey, we beat God. No, you really didn't, because that time isn't up yet. So we'll get it from there. Verse 5, immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. As they drank from the sacred vessels of the temple and praised idols with concubines, what happens? So his hand appears, just right on the wall. This has got to be one of the creepiest things in the Bible. To me, this is just Scooby-Doo level creepiness right here, you know. They drive the mystery van in just to solve this thing. Where was the hand from? Why is it writing on the wall? Yeah, the thing from the Addams family, yeah. He comes out of his box, scrambles over there. John?
Were they just drinking, or maybe doing other stuff?
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. 1,000 lords and enough women and concubines and alcohol. They were, what was the words back here? They praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. There ain't no way to celebrate and praise those gods other than more than alcohol. I still think we need almost an R-rated church sometime. We need R-rated Bible studies, late at night, adults only. So.
You know, when you have a giant party like that, and the alcohol is flowing.
This is that party.
Egos grow. All that other stuff makes sense. They just go bonkers.
It just adds up.
And then suddenly.
This is that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was telling Steve a while back, I was talking about the movie Dragnet with, who's in that? Dragnet's got Tom Hanks in it. You guys ever see the movie Dragnet? It's old, but it was a movie. Yeah, it was a remake. But anyway, it had I don't know. Anyways, they had a pagan festival, and these guys were wearing goat leggings and stuff like that. It was it was actually funny. But anyways, guys walking around with trays full of drugs. You want the blue ones, the yellow ones, the red ones. It's that kind of party. You know, that's the party that it was. It was anything and everything. So yeah, personally, I would say it would have been that level of stuff. So what happens? If I can put in a movie set, you can hear the needle scratch across the record, right? The lady screams, she drops her drink, you know, every head turns. Yeah, exactly. It's shock and silence, like there's not a sound to be heard for 5 seconds in the movie. You know, that's what happened at this party, everything's going on, you know. So that's what I think kind of happens here. Like I said, the big picture. This picture these guys drew, not a bad picture. This hand writing on the wall. You can see the king here. I'm pretty sure he's the king. He's looking pretty scared at that. Everybody's pointing. Nobody knows what's going on. Pandemonium. That's all I can say. Verse 6, then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. What color did the king change to? White is a good guess, isn't it? You'd think white. I mean, the picture here has him as white. Even his beard turned white. Maybe beards are supposed to be white. Mine is. So, white's a good guess. Any other guesses what color he turned to?
Green, red.
Green's not a bad guess either. That's like the common, the emojis have the green face. It's too much. He's been hit in the stomach, basically. I don't have the victory over God. He can feel it, I'm sure, before we even proceed. So what's going through his mind? That I think he can feel the handwriting on the wall. But what else could be going through his mind? Party's going on. Hand starts writing on the wall.
Time to move.
It's just time to move. The hand might have a big fly swatter next. Right?
And then fear.
Confusion and fear. I was in charge here until this hand shows up.
Well, he challenged God, and God met the challenge. He showed up. He didn't think he was going to show up.
He didn't think he was going to show up. No, we're worshiping every god of all time. He ain't going to show up. He ain't man enough to show up. He showed up. He sees it pretty quick. Oops, back. Verse 7, the king called loudly to bring in the enchanters. Bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. He's screaming over everybody else running around in panic. Bring in the wise men. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing, whoever can read that, whoever can show me what it means, whoever shall be clothed in purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, shall be the third ruler of the kingdom. So what's the big man's plan to understand the handwriting on the wall? Bring in somebody that can read it. That's the first thing. Bring in the best. Bring in the mathematicians. Bring in the scientists. Bring in the guys who know the times, the men of Issachar. Bring in the enchanters. Bring in the magicians. Bring in anybody with a crystal ball. Bring in the palm reader out on the interstate. Bring them all in. We need to know what that says. Does he think it's a congratulatory message from his idols? Right? Hey, this is a great party. That's what it says. Thanks for worshiping here. Do you think that's what it says? We know it doesn't. But could he?
His reaction.
His reaction says, no. He knows that's not what it is. It can't be. So he knows it. So he thinks this is just something minor. No. He says, bring in everybody. I'm willing to give up purple cloth, chain of gold. I'm willing to make you the third king. We got me, Daddy, and you. We're going to run this place. That's a big thing to give up that kind of power. A God gives up power? We don't give up power. Third ruler in the kingdom brings back the rabbit we chased earlier. So you got, like I said, him, Daddy, and the magic interpreter shall be crowned. Number 3. Sounds like a good limerick or something, a good story start. The king shall be numbered of 3. Number 8, verse 8, then all the king's wise men came in, and they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. So they bring in the wise men. How'd they do? Poorly. Did you expect them to do any better than that? No. How do we know this stuff? It's easy, right? It's easy from this side, 2,500 years later.
Grandfather, same thing happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm greater than God? No, you're not. He's right.
The dream.
Yes.
Same thing happened. Same guys couldn't do a thing with it.
Yeah, he brought it. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He asked all the great people wisdom. They like, no, we can't hold it. Can't hold an oath to it. He's saying the same kind of thing in Egypt with Pharaoh. The magicians held up to Moses through a couple of the couple plagues. Sorry, thanks. But I have my own plague going on. But the next 8, nah, they give up. They can't even keep up. So, and it's kind of the same thing here. No, it's the same story over and over again. So why couldn't they even read the handwriting? It's just writing, right? They knew it was writing, so why couldn't they read it? Did they say what language it was? No. What language would it be in? You know the story, right? You know? Not too well? Well, let me ask you this. What language do the Babylonians speak?
Babylonian.
Babylonian, always a good guess, right? There you go. It's always a good time. Quite honestly, they would speak Chaldean. Chaldean is probably what they spoke. I think their written language would probably been cuneiform. Would been, maybe I might be wrong on that. But it looks like it's writing, but it's not our writing. I can look at, I can look at Russian and say it's Russian, but I know I don't speak Russian, right? I know that P is backwards, and that's about it. And actually, Camille knows the sounds of those letters because she spent enough time in Russia. She can sound stuff out. And once you sound it out, then you can probably guess what some things mean. How about Japanese and Chinese? You see it, you know it's Asian. I can't tell the difference between Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, right? Sanskrit, I can't tell the difference. I just know it's not mine. So, not their language. So, quite honestly, it's probably written in Hebrew when you get to the story. So, verse 9, and King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. Does this help Belshazzar feel better? No, it didn't. What color did he change to now? He was already white. It says his color changed.
Maybe red.
Maybe red. Maybe he's mad, right? Maybe he's mad. Maybe he's whiter than white. Maybe he starts fading into brown or black. Maybe it's green now. Maybe it was white earlier. Maybe he's green. It's not going good for him. He changed his color. So I like the fact that he changed his color. That's why I put it in the title. Verse 10 and 11. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom the spirit of the holy gods, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. I left the footnotes in this one. This is in the ESV with the footnotes. I left these in for a reason. Footnote C, it says the queen. It could be the queen mother. If you think about it, what credibility difference would you see between the queen and the queen mother? The queen mother, well, one, it's mom, right? Sometimes mom just has more credibility. Mom says something, and it's like, well, I better listen to mom. She's got a few more years in it. And this fact, she says, there's a man in the kingdom. She knows about Daniel. She's been around. She knows. Don't just keep calling these guys. Call the guy that's done it before. So, quite honestly, it's a good possibility it's the queen mom, or even his grandmother. So, and for D, it says, there's a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods. And the footnote says, or the spirit of the holy God. Big difference right there. You got the spirit of the gods that were just worshipped, or the spirit of the real God. Which spirit does Daniel really have? Spirit of the holy God, right? Well, what about the view of his spirit? Would it be different between the queen and the queen mother? If it was, for instance, his grandmother. If it was Belshazzar's grandmother talking about his spirit, would she know, which spirit would she think he has? She would know he has the spirit of God. Whereas the queen of the guy who just had the party would say, he's got the spirit, I hear he has the spirit of these gods we were just worshiping almost. She wouldn't give credibility to the holy God either. So there could be both things. I like the footnotes. It gives a different dimension to the story. And we know the answer about the holy God thing. Verse 11 continues, and in the days of your father, which probably his grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, light and understanding and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers. So it goes back to Nebuchadnezzar's grandfather. It says father. The wording on that, the terminology is, it is what it is. Abraham was father too. So responsibility Nebuchadnezzar gave him, he was the only one that could interpret the dreams. He was in charge of those guys. He's the chief of that. So it's still remembered, basically 70 years later. Because an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, and interpret dreams, explain riddles, solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Aren't we glad they don't have Belteshazzar and Belshazzar all in the same story, just interchangeably? Just back and forth. It would be the tongue twister. Snoop Dogg could teach that story, I think. So now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. So that's the guy. Yeah, and we know that. We know Daniel is the guy. So that's the party scene. That's the party, the handwriting on the wall, and bring in the guy who can really tell you. So picking up in verse 14. I should have started in verse 13, shouldn't I? I think it is 13. I got it numbered wrong. Anyways, Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, "You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah." You like the spin that he puts on him? You know, CNN, Fox News, they got nothing on this kind of stuff. This is old school. Look at the spin he put on that. What kind of spin did they put on it?
Slave.
Yeah, you're a slave. Basically, it says you're an exile of Judah. Judah puked you out. Judah didn't want you. You know, you're an exile from there. It's not, but the truth was, he was captive. They went in, took the best. They brought him home. But he makes it sound like Judah got rid of him. Whom the king brought over from Judah. Like I say, you're just slave. You know, we've given you refuge. Judah spit you out. We've given you a great place to live right here. So the spin's still there. It's no different today. But I just brought that out. Verse 14 and 15. I've heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, that they could not show the interpretation of the matter. So Spirit of God, Spirit of God.
Has a misunderstanding. He attributes it to Daniel only.
You're right, he does. He interprets this completely to Daniel. Daniel's the guy who knows he's the king of the wise men because he's the wisest. He doesn't see God in this at all. He still doesn't. Still doesn't. And that's back to the moral of the story. You know, every knee shall bow to the real God. Whether you believe in God or not, on the last day, you're going to believe. You're going to see him. It's just that way. You got your choice, but when it happens quick. Verse 16, but I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Like Chuck says, it says you. It doesn't say your God. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. So the offer is the same offer he made earlier to the wise man. I'll bring out the goods. This is better than a fatted calf in the ring. This is, you know, it's better than candy. It's better than that can of ravioli or a shared box of cornflakes. You know, it is. If only I had purple to throw out. One of these blankets that's usually laying around. I think one of those is purple. This is the deal, man. I mean, we would line up for something like that. Just let me take a guess, you know. But no, he's not going to guess. He's the guy. Verse 17, and Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself. Keep it. And give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing of the king and make known to him the interpretation. That's his answer. Keep your gifts. I'm not here for that. But I am going to read the writing, and I'm going to give you the interpretation. I'm here, God has sent me to do this, but in the end he takes it. But anyways. Verse 18, O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. Because of the greatness that he gave them, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed. And whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up. Whom he would, he humbled. Who does Daniel declare to be the king?
Yep.
God. God's the king. And it says, you know, your grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, had all this power, but it came from God. God, you know, Nebuchadnezzar, he was obviously king of kings, but the king of kings is the real king. He's who gave this power to him. All this power. If you're going to be an earthly tyrant, you know, what says that I'm a tyrant better than people tremble and fear before me? I kill who I want to kill. I keep alive who I want to keep alive. It's all good. I'll raise up who I want to raise up. I'll humble who I want to humble. That's how you act like you're a tyrant, how you're a big king here. So what spin does Daniel put on Nebuchadnezzar's power? He twists it, like I said. Belshazzar puts that spin on it. We did you a favor. Daniel puts the spin back. No, God did you guys a favor for all this time. But the rent's due is basically where it's at. Well, lessons here for all the rulers, all the kings, all the presidents, all the tyrants, what lessons in here for everybody that's in charge? You're in charge because God wants you in charge. Whether it's for good or bad, He still holds that power. And we should all answer that, whether people want to believe that or not. They all will. So that goes for the President of the United States. It goes for the guy down in Cuba who is not a Castro. I don't know. I never remember his name. It goes for the leader of Iran. All of us. All of them. Verse 20 and 21. Well, when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom He will. So Daniel recounts what was in the previous chapter, Daniel 4. We didn't cover that here. It's not our purpose to cover Daniel. Anyways, that chapter ends with, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all His works are right, and His ways are just, and those who walk in pride, He's able to humble. And Nebuchadnezzar, basically, as Chuck alluded to, Nebuchadnezzar said, look at all the great stuff that I've done. And God goes, look at all the great stuff that I made you do. And He crashed him. He crashed him clear down to the point where he was living outside. He was crazy. He was eating grass. It's a bad state. And he saw God, and that's where you see at the end. He sees God and was able to come back to power. Verse 22 and 23, and you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. And the vessels of His house have been brought in here before you, and you and your lords, your wives, your concubines, have drunk wine from them. You have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze, iron, wood, stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. It's pretty bold. Daniel's standing before a king who's kills who he wants to kill and lets people live as they want to live. And he says, you know what happened to your grandfather. You know all that stuff. Yet you're bold enough to think you got victory over the God. You're bold enough to take his stuff from his temple and have a really epic party. You know all this stuff. And, you can almost see the slap of the face, the bring out the guards, release the hounds. This is where it's at this point. Chuck?
Well, Daniel's probably about 85 or 86 by now.
You're probably right.
So he's probably kind of going, okay, it's over. I know it's over because I know what's on the wall. And I'm going to let you know why it's over.
Yeah. Yeah, Daniel's been through it all. He's been in captivity for 70 years. If there's something that could have happened to Daniel, it's happened. And like I said, his time's up. He knows the captivity's up. Yeah, he's just going to say it. It's his job. God took care of Daniel, put him in the position he was, put this interpretation in his head to stand before the king and tell him the truth that nobody else would tell him. Nobody else could tell him. Verse 24, then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed. Sorry, it is inscribed. Mene, tekel, parson. Anybody's got a better Hebrew than me? Bring it on. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So for the first time, we see what the handwriting said. They haven't even, in the chapter, they didn't even say it until this far. It's probably written in Hebrew. and what it says sounds like Aramaic. So it's kind of a transliteration. It's written in Hebrew, sounds like Aramaic. What do you know about Aramaic?
You know it's dead.
It was, yeah, Aramaic was dead. No, it wasn't dead. Aramaic wasn't dead. You know, I don't know if Aramac's dead or not now. Aramaic was the common language of the Jews. They had Hebrew, but it was a more formal language. Aramaic is when they spoke to one another.
When he was talking with the disciples.
When he spoke to the disciples, he was probably talking Aramaic to them. And we have examples of him speaking Aramaic, and he left in Aramaic in the Bible, which is, that's it right there. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. We know that. That one stayed in Aramaic, which translates to, we could have had it in English, but it still stayed in Aramaic. I think Daniel picks up at the end of his chapter, I think it finishes actually in Aramaic. It wasn't written in Hebrew, and it writes in Aramaic for a few chapters, and then it comes back to Hebrew. But anyways, so these are written probably in Hebrew on the wall, Hebrew characters, but it would be transliterated. Like Mine might have been written with Hebrew letters, but as you say it, it's like, oh, well, that's the Aramaic word that means this. So Mine sounds like an Aramaic for numbered. So we know that Belshazzar's days were numbered at this point. His kingdom is numbered. We've already looked at that. Tekel sounds like Aramaic for weighed. He's been weighed. He's been found, you weigh something, this bag of gold right here weighs 100 pounds of gold. It is worth, $1 billion, but obviously it's not, right? It's the same kind of thing. He's not who he says he is. He doesn't weigh out. He's hollow. And Perez, it's interpreted as parson. So it's parson on the wall. Perez is the singular parson. It sounds like Aramaic for divided. And it's going to be divided between Mede and Persia. I got that written wrong, but it's going to be divided. Mede and Persia will take over, and they're actually in succession, right? They're not split. It's one after. Yeah. They're together. Okay, so it's split amongst those guys.
It's between Darius and Cyrus.
You're right. It's not a king. It's not two kingdoms. It's one kingdom, and they kind of.
Stronger.
One's a little stronger, but it's kind of divided between them. So that's where it's at. And that goes along with what we saw with the idol. It goes along with what we saw for the four beasts. So what we saw with the ram had the two horns.
No, the goat. The
goat
had the two horns.
The one with two horns.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm sorry.
It was ram. You had a
It
goat.
was a sheep. It was a ram sheep.
Okay, ram sheep. God's numbered Belshazzar's days. He has shown for himself to be unworthy. His kingdom will be handed over to the Medes and the Persians. But we knew that, right? Like I said, last 3 weeks we've been in there. If you've shared this fun time with us, you already knew that. We've looked at 3 different prophecies that said this is going to happen. Babylonians going to end. It's going to be handed over to the Medes and the Persians. The statue, the 4 beasts, the ram and the goat. So it just goes from gold down to silver. Verse 29, then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and the proclamation was made about him, that he should be the third ruler of the kingdom. Hear ye, Belteshazzar shall be the king under Belshazzar. Despite the bad news, he kept his end of the deal, which is pretty hard to believe, really, but he kept his end of the deal. He gave Daniel what was due. What color do you think Belshazzar turned now? You think he changed color?
Wasn't good news.
No. It wasn't good news, and he's giving up, he's given up some of his power to the third guy now, even. So we've seen white, we've seen green. Maybe it's a different shade of green. A little envy in there. A little lost some high and mighty, a little tarnish on the gold. Verse 30 and 31, finish up the chapter. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. Darius the Mede received a kingdom, being about 62 years old. Just like we said. What color do you think Belshazzar was now?
Gray.
Red. Gray would work too, right? He changed his color again, so he's killed. The prophecies held there. You can read all about it. Basically, they think Darius had already been formed his army. He was in on the attack. It just God's timing. Chuck?
Pretty sure it was Darius with Cyrus.
Darius.
Cyrus is the one who diverted the Euphrates.
Diverted the river because it went through the city,
He went
didn't it?
right through the city, and he diverted the Euphrates and then marched in his army underneath the wall
Yeah.
and then took it. But I'm suspicious that Cyrus probably went back to Persia, where his kingdom head was, and said, Darius, you can stay here. You can be the king here.
Okay. Yeah, there's a whole lot in that. And they take the city by siege, basically. I think they siege it first, and then they divert the water, they lay it at siege, then they come in under the gate.
He did. Yeah.
Very clever, even by today's standards. We see the change of kingdoms exactly as God promised. He said it was going to happen, and it happened. We know God fulfills his promises. We know God's faithful. It always hits me every time you see him keep one of his promises. He made this promise. It had been 70 years. Today's the day. About 70 years. What kind of hope should that give faithful people like Daniel? You got the order of kingdom. It's going to be Babylon, and the Medes, Persians, Greeks, Romans, kingdom of Christ, kingdom of God. Does it give him hope? As it checks one off the list. If that's checked off, he's pretty sure the rest of that stuff's going to be checked off too. And a guy like Daniel, he knows it. He knows it. He won't be there. He won't be there for all that. He won't be there for the kingdom of Christ. But he has that hope for his people. What kind of hope should that give faithful people today?
Sometimes the wilderness can be a long journey.
Yeah, the wilderness can be a long journey, you're right. And so the ultimate thing, the kingdom of Christ, we know is there. That's the ultimate gift, right? It doesn't get any better than that. That's the final kingdom too. There's no kingdom that comes after Christ. So that should give us, the faithful people, gives us that hope that he's worked his way into that. We're in the kingdom of Christ now, the church being the kingdom of Christ. There ain't going to be another kingdom. There ain't going to be a king of such and such, king of gold, tin, or silver. You're already there. You're at the ultimate kingdom. Next week, Chuck's going to pick up in Daniel 6, the Medo-Persian kingdom with lions. Next week. So come join us again. Another chance to win a can of ravioli or a handful of cornflakes or whatever we got going. So thank you all. Sing the